How are you guys doing? Today we're going to be talking about technology. I've been promising to do a video talking about technology, and today is the day. I'm talking about how technology has intersected with culture and race relations, but today's talk is going to be primarily focused on how technology has focused on society and has changed society as a whole in America. And we're going to be looking at a time period starting in 1989 and moving to the present. People have called the age we're living in the information age. And I think that is a very good description of what that age is. Certain, companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Google, Facebook, just to name a few, have changed the world that we live in over the last 20 years or so. So if we were to go back and visit people in a time capsule and talk to them back in the 80s or even early 90s, they wouldn't know anything about a lot of the technology we're talking about. So that technology has changed the way we do almost everything. And we really have to examine that. And we have to look first, though, at what forces led to the emerging of this information age, which really replaced what John Kenneth Galbraith described back in, I believe, his 1967 work, The New Industrial State, where he said we were on post-industrial society. But now we're in this new age where every one of us use a product by that either runs a Microsoft software or even a Microsoft device, Apple devices. We use Google search. We have used the term Google to mean search. So what is all this about? What does this come to mean? And let's look at three events that happened that really changed the world. The first one is that the Soviet Union, the USSR, fell apart under its own weight. A lot of conservatives in the United States like to give credit to President Reagan when he said to Gorbachev, tear down the wall. That's not what caused the Soviet Union to fall behind. It was the nature of its state-controlled economy. They were not using market forces to set prices and distribute goods. It just doesn't work. The government can't dictate what people want to buy and how people will consume. And human psychology shows us that human beings are motivated by many, many factors, but they include greed and acquisition. And people can look at those things very negatively. I, in fact, do sometimes. But there's also good that comes out of it. Innovation. People like Steve Jobs of Apple, the late Steve Jobs, may have not been the nicest person in the world, but he was a creative person, and he came up with a major product. Now, getting back to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, this opened the way to the unraveling of Soviet domination, the USSR, or as they used to call it, the Sovietsky Socialisticheki Republika, 13 republics united under the domination of Russia. For the first time in 100 years after that fall, there was a common economic system in Eastern Europe and Russia with the West. the first time since 1917. The October Revolution of 1917. There were two. There was the Spring Revolution in May, when the Kerensky government came to power. Then there was the October Revolution when Lenin and the Bolsheviks came to power. And Eastern Europe, after World War II, was totally dominated by the Soviet Union, the USSR. So after Russia collapsed, China started instituting market reforms. And the banking system of the world, as much as we like to criticize it, rightfully criticize it, it became the same no matter where in the world you are, whether you're in Helsinki, Finland, or in Johannesburg, South Africa, where my son is visiting right now. We have the same economic system. We're not dealing economic systems. So that opened the door to a common platform for sharing information. Then in 1994 and 1995, some major changes occurred. The most important happened in the summer of 1995. The Microsoft Corporation introduced an operating system, Windows 95, replacing DOS 3.01. And this allowed a product that was introduced in December of 1994 to operate very easily on it. And that was the Netscape Navigator browser. And this allowed you for the first time to look at pictures and images and eventually video and audio over the internet. It also had an email program so you could email people over the internet. This allowed for very, very easy communication. On top of that, Microsoft introduced that same year the Office suite of applications. Docs for editing text documents, Excel for editing spreadsheets, PowerPoint for editing presentations and presenting presentations. These three formats from 1995 to the present have become the standard, which everybody uses. Even if you don't use those programs, you still save your documents to share in a doc format, an Excel spreadsheet format, or in a PowerPoint format if you're sharing it. And Microsoft in 1997, if I remember correctly, it was January 17th of 1997, because I went to the store to get it, introduced the Office suite with Outlook, which was their own email program that combined email, calendar, and task management. That was a major, major thing. Now, granted, that program was buggy and clunky as could be, but it was brand new. So let's go back over some of the things that happened. As a result of these events in 1995, really starting December of 1994, we now had the World Wide Web, which rapidly became available to everyone, the internet. We could send emails to and from people. Soon mobile devices were developed using a compressed format known as MP3, and Apple used AAC. You soon saw laptops that could connect to the internet, cell phones, first PDAs, and then cell phones and smartphones that could connect to the internet. We had digital video, DVDs, digital recording, which had started earlier, but now those flourished. Along with that, cloud computing became a new thing. Individuals could, and companies could, store their data in a remote computer, which we metaphorically call the cloud. It's actually computers on a server somewhere, and access them anywhere. So this is real important. I remember practicing law and being able to send a document that was needed by an assistant district attorney here in the Atlanta area on Christmas Eve in the Atlanta area, and it was Christmas morning where I was in Taipei, Taiwan. And I was able to easily send her that email. Actually, it was a fax, but I sent it by email, and the email converted into a fax, and she received it. This was back in 2002. The streaming of audio and video led to the ability to communicate pictures and images and audio rapidly around the world. As a result of this, we have YouTube. We have all the streaming services for television. I use YouTube TV. I no longer use Comcast cable TV because YouTube TV DVRs in the cloud has the same channels that I had on Comcast. It knows the programs that I watch and I like to watch. I can save programs and automatically DVRs them or records them in the cloud for me, and it just knows what I do. So it's very, very easy. As a result of this, social relationships have changed. We've become much more dependent on our devices. One of the downsides is we're sitting and eating and everybody's playing on their smartphone. People game on the crowd. But this has had tremendous impact, both politically and legally. We saw how President Obama used the internet, used Facebook and social media in a way nobody had used before, as a way of garnering support and garnering donations to its campaign. But on the other hand, this information age has allowed the economies of the world to become more and more intertwined. It no longer matters where workers are located a large amount of the time. You can be in Atlanta, Georgia. You can be in Bangalore, India. You can be in Helsinki, Finland. And you can be in New York City and communicate instantaneously. Now, of course, you have time zones, particularly if you're going from, say, Los Angeles to Tokyo, Japan, from Beijing to Cape Town, South Africa, or Lagos, Nigeria. You always have to account for time zones. Telephone now is not dependent on the old wire system. We do wireless telephone. We have Skype and other internet-based phone services. Yesterday morning, I was on a free call to Busan, Korea, with a former student of mine who's become a friend over the years, and we were on the phone for almost an hour. So these changes have a tremendous impact, both positive and good. Newspapers have now migrated to the internet because it's so much easier to read a newspaper on a tablet and not have that sticky, dirty paper. Plus, they can update it during the day so your news becomes current. You don't need, like when I was a child, a morning newspaper and an afternoon newspaper. I remember my parents got the New York Times, the Daily News, and the old New York Mirror in the morning. Then they would get the New York Post, back when it was a liberal newspaper, believe it or not, in the afternoon. It was an afternoon newspaper. And then when we moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island, we would get the Staten Island Advance, which came in the afternoon. So with this internationalization of the economy, jobs have largely shifted to places where the salaries of workers are low. Countries like China, India, places in South America have benefited greatly from this, and Americans have benefited because the products that we buy are much less expensive. And particularly the Japanese during the 70s and 80s, prior to this time, started exporting products which were of a higher quality, particularly when we think of quality control. Their breakage, their breakdowns were far less. They were using modern equipment that's used computer generated robot technology to make products. So as a result, jobs in the United States shifted from the higher paying manufacturing sector, car jobs, auto jobs. We saw Detroit really decline dramatically. And blue collar jobs, factory jobs began to disappear. And with that, we had the attacks on the Union that were put in place primarily by President Reagan. That was one of his big things. If you remember the air controllers strike in the early 80s, that was a major effect. So as a result of this, companies are now international. There's no such thing as an American-made product anymore, really, because the products are made all over the world. I mean, your Dell computer may be buying hard disks from Samsung in Korea. It may be assembled in Kuala Lumpur or outside Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and designed here in the United States. This happens all the time. Your Samsung phone may be designed in Seoul, Korea, with engineers who went to school in Daejeon, but it's built in China. This is the world that we live in. So as a result of this and the concentration of wealth in the upper echelons of society, we've seen a resulting increase in poverty and inequality. And understand, corporations have taken advantage of this. Didn't have to happen. I mean, if we look at the period just between 1983 and 2000, the median earnings of American workers more than doubled, but the top 20% enjoyed the biggest gains. The average everyday worker salary has fallen. Median earnings, meaning average earnings, have fell 15% in this period. And more than 40% of all gains were gained by the top 1%. As of 2000, the top U.S. chief executives, including their bonus and stocks options, were making 475 times the average worker in their own companies. And this comes from Business Week, the business magazine. So we see how inequality that we experience now is a direct result of not just globalization, but of the greed of the top 1%. It didn't have to happen this way. Yes, we have moved to a service economy from a manufacturing economy. And there are a lot of high-tech jobs. So education has become more important, but we're cutting it. We're cutting funding to education. We're cutting research. And right now with the Trump administration, we are cutting vital things like the fight against global warming, clean air standards, clean water standards, because it's just about corporate capitalism and greed. I like to call it gangster capitalism. Donald Trump has always been a gangster. Yes, I said it. He's always been a racist. The record is there. All you have to do is read. I mean, the conservative Nixon Justice Department brought him to court for racial discrimination in housing in 1973. He entered a consent decree. He and his dad. They violated it, and they got brought back into court in 1977. He opened the warm-up for his bid for the presidency, attacking President Obama as not being a citizen, claiming all the information he was getting from Hawaii. He was lying through his teeth. He's the liar in chief. And he ran for president in 2016. He was getting dirt. He took as much as he could and emails from the Russians through intermediary WikiLeaks and directly meeting with the Russians, conspiring with the Russians in violation of U.S. financial regulations, taking in-kind contributions. That is illegal. We talk about collusion, but collusion is just a fancy word for conspiracy, and that is a crime. Rudy Giuliani, Trump's lawyer, may call saying collusion is not a crime, conspiracy is, and taking money or in-kind contributions from foreign powers in an election year, that is a crime. Paying off hush money to women who he slept with and to others and workers to keep quiet is an in-kind campaign contribution. That's a crime. So I'm going to wind up this video. I've gotten a little long. I like to talk. By saying the changes in technology both have been benefits to us and have been a detriment to us, have been bad for us. We have to use these tools to benefit our interests. Anyone on a shoestring budget like me, using my iPhone, can make a YouTube video and communicate information. So it's available. Everybody moves at the same speed, but with the end of net neutrality regulations and the lack of regulating the internet as if it was a utility when in fact it is, because of Republican business interests who don't want that, may make things change. But we have to fight. I always say, when I talk about this concurrent administration, I call the president when he was running Manchurian candidate, and now I call him Manchurian president. And on the top of my Twitter page, at Armwood, and my Facebook page, John Armwood, I have a picture of Donald Trump dressed up as a Borg. I'm a techie, as you can see. You see my HAL 9000 computer poster from the movie 2001 over there. And above me I have the poster from that movie. I use the hashtag resistance is not futile, because that's what the Borg, the character that I have dressed up as, used to say. Resistance, it is futile. So Alexa, resistance is futile.
I have nothing to say to you, and I will resist you with my last ounce of strength.
That is what my philosophy is. I will resist this Trump administration by all means necessary. You guys have a good day, and stay tuned for the next video. Thank you.